Welcome everyone. This is part 6 of Franklin, Delano, Floyd. Now, what I'm going to do is take everything that has happened from part 4 and part 5 and try to break things down so that things make more sense. Because as we were sitting there discussing everything, so much has happened, so I decided to take time to kind of explain as these things have happened. Now, as I said before, in Georgia, Suzanne had applied for Georgia Tech University and she had gotten a scholarship. But Franklin would not sit there and let her go to college. And shortly after she had gotten a scholarship, she had actually gotten pregnant. A lot of people will sit there and say that Franklin had gotten her pregnant just so she would lose her scholarship. And shortly after that, she losing the scholarship, Franklin would sit there and make Suzanne put the child up for adoption. And it was at this point that they had moved to Florida. When they arrived in Florida, Franklin would sit there and make Suzanne start dancing as an exotic dancer. She would actually get pregnant again, and Franklin would sit there and allow her to keep the child. And she had a son and named him Michael Anthony Hughes. And when she would be working, they would have a babysitter watching Michael while she would go to work because Franklin would not leave Suzanne from her sight. While this was going on, Suzanne actually befriended a friend at work who was a model and a dancer, and that was Cheryl Ann that we had discussed in the last video. And as I had said before, Franklin would sit there and try to persuade Cheryl Ann to sit there and do a film, and under the guise that he had had connections in Hollywood. And he would actually sit there and make her do scenes with Suzanne. She would later say to a few friends that were working with her that Franklin would also sit there and try to do things with her, and she kept pushing him off. And this made a lot of the relationship between Franklin and Cheryl Ann very volatile. When Cheryl Ann had realized that Franklin had no intention of helping her go into acting, she had then reported Suzanne to the authorities, saying that she was lying about the income that she was getting because she was making about $1,500 a night. And when she lost her benefits because of having Michael Anthony, she lost those things. And Franklin had actually confronted Cheryl Ann about it. There was actually a very heated argument. And as I said in the last video, after the argument, she was never seen from again. The truth is, that night, Franklin would actually kill Cheryl Ann and hide her body. And her skeletal remains would not be found until 1995. And might I add, she went missing around 1989. Around the time that Franklin had actually murdered Cheryl Ann is around the time that him and Suzanne and Michael had left. And Suzanne was actually pregnant again with a third child. And this child, Franklin would also sit there and make her put up for adoption. The really weird thing about them leaving was the babysitter who had actually lived next door to them would testify that one particular night after they had left, someone had actually went inside the trailer where they had lived and walked outside and flicked an ashtray, and the entire trailer blew up in flames. She would later testify that she said it was either Franklin or Franklin paying someone to blow up their home. At this point, they had actually moved to New Orleans, where they had dropped the father-daughter gimmick, and now Franklin was sitting there and actually going as husband and wife. And they had changed their name from Franklin changing his name to Clarence Hughes. And Suzanne would actually change her name to Tanya Tadlock and would actually get married in New Orleans, and then changing it from Tanya Tadlock to Tanya Hughes. But at this point, the relationship between Franklin and Suzanne had gotten extremely violent. She was still dancing at an actual dance club in New Orleans, But this time, Franklin would sit there, and if she didn't make so much money, he would beat her viciously. A lot of her dancers would sit there and try to get her to get away from her captor. But Suzanne would often tell her coworkers, I can't leave him, because he said that if I ever left him, he would kill me and the baby.